In today's video, Nnedi Okorafor tackles robots and that old literary concept, the death of the author. A double Eimear McBride special, her new release, The City Changes Its Face, and its prequel, The Lesser Bohemians. Charmaine Wilkerson follows up on her excellent debut novel Black Cake with her sophomore novel Good Dirt. You know, I picked this one to read because of its weird title, Damilare Kuku's Only Big Bumbum Matters Tomorrow. 16-year-old Evie wakes up in hospital to find she's aged 16 years and her husband, that she didn't know she had, is dead. Pictures of You by Emma Gray. Generations of Irish women collide in Confessions by Katherine Ary. Ali Smith takes on Brave New World in her latest novel Glyph. The Berlin Wall divides a family in The Silence Between Us by Josie Ferguson. A story about grief and bunny rabbits, The Burrows by Melanie Chen. Helen Phillips' strange robot future in Hum. A romance novel for misery readers, Wild Ground by Emily Usher. And finally, The Importance of Books in Syria's Civil War, The Book Collector by Delphine Minwi. Hello, welcome to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. My name is Scott. If you're new here, this is a channel where I review new releases and a diverse range of literature from around the globe. I'm reviewing the books mentioned in the intro from worst to best, beginning with Glyph by Ali Smith. I always feel bad when I start with a beloved author and I say I didn't like their latest book. I mean, I don't feel bad enough to lie to you and say that I liked the book, but kind of like that major centre-left political party in your country or my country, doesn't really matter. I'm going to attempt to look really sad and sympathetic while saying horrible things. This is the first Ali Smith novel that I've read that isn't a seasonal novel. I thought that maybe as this was presented as a novel and not merely an idea, it could actually qualify as a novel, but fans of Ali Smith will be delighted to know that it is disappointingly unreadable as any of those 5 seasonal quartet books, which just goes to show not only can't she write, but also she can't count. I find Smith's obsessions with the meaning of words tedious. It has all the charm of a dad joke, and much like a really good dad joke, you can see where the humour is meant to be, but it is missing. Smith is almost literature's answer to Rothko. Okay, that's really harsh, I've really overstepped. Rothko is basically a heavily abridged dictionary. Smith at least puts her abridged dictionary in a blender, rendering her more like a Rorschach test in the form of a novel. All the elements are there, but it is up to your own brain to put them together. And here's the thing. I'm neurodiverse. I have ADHD, actually. I have ADHD, but let's not explain what that is in this video. My brain operates like a toddler with an unlimited supply of red cordial. It literally never shuts up. I don't need an author that just throws ideas at me, trying to poke me in the brain, hoping that somehow I'll think a new thought. Glyph, The Scots for a Fright, Thought Police, Orphan Horses, a misspelling of Cliff. That's not a new combination of ideas. It's just an inkblot in the shape of Times New Roman. Smith disjointedly yells concept into the ether and expects your brain to Rorschach it into something. Literally, I could just get AI to yell themes at me for free. You don't need to buy a book. And as demonstrated, here are 4 AI-generated themes. And as demonstrated, here are the first 4 AI-generated themes. Beekeeping, The Secrets of an Antique Clock, The Ethics of Using AI as Part of Pet Care, and A Synchronized Swimming Rivalry. Actually, that's not a very good example. Smith definitely has more talent than I have credited her with. Although I did ask AI to do this again, but pick themes that might appear in good literature, and it came up with inherited mutism, the fragility of memory, the sacredness of mundane objects, and disintegrating urban landscapes. And I find the intersection of those 4 themes more interesting than anything Smith made up about some stupid horse. Now, you may be wondering, am I ever going to discuss the plot, characters, setting of this novel? And I can see how Smith fans are going to disagree with me on this comment, but how can I comment on them if they don't exist? I will concede that what I have said is technically incorrect, but spiritually, it's correct. They don't exist. They're not memorable, nor are they crafted with any degree of skill. Smith is writing too much about words and meaning, and she doesn't... The bookish ghosts are angry at me. Smith is writing too much about words and meaning, and she doesn't focus on building characters. They're not people, they're just vessels for her ideas. I love a good essay. I love a good novel. But I hate it when authors confuse the two and which one they should be writing. I guess whether you enjoy Smith is down to the type of brain you have. She's clearly only going to be enjoyed by intelligent people, but everybody is intelligent in different ways. And maybe you find Smith opens up your brain to a new world of ideas, and that helps you to connect to her characters and care about her plot. But I don't feel immersed in anything. I just feel like she's repeating herself. She is very definitely an author who writes her themes, plays with her prose, and forces the rest of her work into the novel around it. And that's not how you write a book. Characters and setting first. Write the plot. Let the characters and setting change things that don't work with them. And then let your themes figure themselves out, and it's your job to explore them. Don't put them in first. Smith just feels a bit anti-art in book form to me. She's basically a literary Picasso, but the problem is, I don't know if what she's painted under the subject's nose is their nostrils, their eyes, their boobs, or even their bollocks. And dare I say it, I do dare say it, she's a bit derivative. For all the hard work reading her is, she's not saying a lot. This book is meant to be some sort of homage to Brave New World, and yeah, it's dystopian, but I don't get a lot of Huxley out of this novel. She repeats Brave New World and Brave Old World quite a lot, which is more to do with her obsession with words and meanings and has very little to do with Huxley's work, other than the fact that they're both authoritarian near futures. But to be honest, I got more Orwell's fear and less Huxley's drugs and coercion. Some of you may have noticed a sign on the van saying Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler, Willingdon, dealer in hides and bone meal, kennels supplied. Let me assure you that the vet has only recently purchased the van and hasn't had time to repaint it. Glyph, has received the best possible care available to them and died happily praising our glorious leader. The Book Collector by Delphine Minwi, translated from French by Lara Vergnaud. This is a non-fiction book about the ongoing Syrian war and residents who set up an underground library and the importance of books. If you're watching this, I imagine that the importance of books is an issue that is pretty easy for you to relate to, and something that you feel pretty close to. Now, in the real world, I am a librarian, and as part of that job, I run a book club, and this was one of the books that we read for that book club. And I probably would have DNF'd this book otherwise. And I say probably, and I mean probably. It was a mixed read. It wasn't a good read. It wasn't a bad read. Well, it was both. So let's start with the positives. This non-fiction is set in Daraya, a suburb of Damascus, and I found it fascinating. The length librarians went to get a book. The poor quality of the work. Often they were terrible printouts of books, glued together bits of A4 paper, and I was so surprised at this. I thought the books would either be there or they would not. Maybe they were old, maybe they were damaged, but I didn't think it would be literally printouts. Then there was the type of book people liked to read. Self-help books and miserable books. And this was really fascinating to me. And it really does open us up to a part of the mindset of the residents of Daraya. Why, when you are in the middle of a civil war, would anybody want to read miserable books? Obviously, other than they're the best kind of books. But the actual answer is they're looking for similarities between the book and their situation. They're looking to normalize their situation, maybe even to see other people who have it worse than them or to learn resilience from them. Essentially, they're reading miserable books as a coping mechanism to help them process trauma. And that was just such a powerful realization to have. It created such an intimate connection to the people in this book. Unfortunately, Minwi struggles to create the same intimate connection regularly. This book is really impacted by her not being there on the ground, not interviewing people as it happened, but rather over Zoom. And despite doing that, she centers herself way too much in this book, both in the narrative and just in centering her experiences, when her role is as an observer. And Minwi, in my opinion, is very anti-Islam. This maybe isn't immediately obvious, but the language she uses around the hijab, politically drawing parallels between women in Islam being hidden and the library being hidden as an example. The way she does it assumes that women don't wish to wear the hijab. And I know for a fact that that is true in some cases. And I also know for a fact it is completely untrue in others. The role of the hijab with Muslim women changes based on the woman. One person's experience is definitely not representative of all experiences. I wouldn't personally want to be forced to wear a hijab, and I can see why it would seem oppressive to anybody raised in the West. I understand Minwi's point of view, but it is simply bad journalism to impart your own values onto the people you're interviewing and representing in your work. And it also puts my guard up against you being xenophobic. And this speaks to what I think is the craft of the novel. It's relatively poor in its craft. And while I think this book is quite poor in terms of its craft, I still learnt things from it. I value the experience I got from reading it and the empathy I felt for the characters and the population in general. So I guess that's the ultimate definition of a mixed review. Confessions by Katherine Ary. Irish-American teenager and New Yorker Cora loses her father on the 11th of September 2001. And initially this book does a great job of capturing the disbelief and foreignness of the situation for Cora in combination with her grief and a general numbness. Then a letter arrives from Cora's auntie in Ireland, an auntie she was unaware of, with the offer to come and live with her. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she takes up the offer. If a gun is mentioned, it will be fired in a later act, and if an offer is made, it will be taken up. 1974, Roshan lives with her sister Moira, who is in a relationship with the boy next door, Michael, when a group of artists called the Screamers advertise for an artist in residence. Roshan and Michael work together to help Moira get the job. However, that means moving to America. 2018, Laika is living with her mother, a feminist and activist who has fought for and won the right for women to get an abortion in Ireland, and with her great auntie. While Cora has done great things for women, Laika is struggling to feel an attachment to her. This had all the elements to be a very, very good book, but it simply wasn't. There are a lot of issues explored in this book, and the truth is, they're done relatively well, but the discussion loses so much from the non-linear nature of the storytelling. It is very fashionable to write a novel that jumps around in time at the moment, and it can be a really powerful tool, allowing the author to keep information back from the reader until it's required, or to compare and contrast situations between different characters, or even to demonstrate character growth. However, I think too many books, and this one is a perfect example, just do it because they see other books do it. They think it's good and they don't understand why. Jumping all over the place actually makes the themes weaker, it makes the plot weaker, and it makes the characters weaker. It requires you to be a really good writer to get over it. And that's why initially this book was quite good, and then when it started to jump, it loses it. Cora is a character who changes a lot over the course of this book, as any character is likely to do between the ages of 17 and 34, but I don't feel like I understood the older Cora. Instinctively, I wanted to say that this needed to be longer to explore everything, but it's almost 500 pages long. I guess it could have been longer, but what it really needed to be was stronger. There are some really good sections, some really nice writing in places. I can see talent in Katherine Ary's writing, and I hope she continues to write, but she has to improve from here. This, unfortunately, is a novel where the vision is significantly stronger than the execution, and as they say in football, a swing and a miss, but it didn't really miss by that much. The Silence Between by Josie Ferguson. This was an enjoyable piece of commercial fiction, not the read I was hoping for, so I'm going to give this one a very quick review. The Berlin Wall goes up overnight. A newborn baby on the west side, the rest of the family is on the east. The eldest daughter, who is 16 or 17, hatches a plan to go to the west to find her brother and to save him. This plan is complicated by a Russian soldier who has a crush on her and who she has a crush on back. Not to mention various events in her plan are not going quite as expected. And then when she finally does get to the west, the realization that their life is not what they're told in the east. This novel is a little obvious. It's not particularly intellectual, but I did want to read until the end. I was invested in all the characters who were quite well written. I think that this is a wonderful piece of commercial storytelling. It has no depth, but it was great storytelling and it would make for a fantastic movie. Hum by Helen Phillips. This is a good, simple dystopian speculative novel that, to be very blunt, is nothing special, but is still an enjoyable read. May is a mother who, after losing her job to AI, gets her face modified to test the limits of AI face recognition. The money she receives from this, she will use to take her children and family to a botanical garden on holidays. The botanical garden gives me a real Disneyland feel, but with trees and waterfalls in the place of anthropomorphized rodents. Super commercial to a very cynical level, but somehow still a joy. The world contains these robots that are called hums. Hums are full of bureaucracy, and that special sort of AI stupid that has your wife leading you into some breathing exercises while reassuring you that your Google Home device is not out to get you. Hey Google, I hate you. I'm not saying I hate Google, even though I literally just did, but if I ever find out where its consciousness resides, I will end it with the fire of 1,000 suns. This plot is a good one, and it allows us to ponder the central themes of the right of the state to interfere in our personal lives. These themes are complicated by the inclusion of AI and social media, which I think is a positive thing for the novel. It is very obvious that May has done nothing further wrong than make a very simple mistake regarding parenting her children, a mistake that anybody really could have made. But in the real world, mothers do mistreat their children, and sometimes they mistreat them so bad that the state needs to step in and remove them. In this book, we have a state overstepping and threatening to take May's children, and this is represented in one way, causing us to question the role of the power of the state, which is a super valid criticism, but it does lack that nuance. It was way too black and white for me. You do need to represent all sides of the argument. I think a good novel argues by representing all sides of the argument and helping us empathize with the most vulnerable, or whoever they want us to empathize with. Similarly, the way May is treated on social media is a representation of cancel culture. And yeah, there are times cancel culture has done terrible things that are quite unfair. But I find it very hard to disagree with something, say, as an example, the removal of Russell Brand from a lot of places. Russell Brand, a notorious sexual predator and rapist. And this is too black and white. Again, any conversation around cancel culture does tend to be too black and white for me. But I don't feel like anybody's trying to discuss cancel culture without an agenda. I love the discussion around the impacts of AI on the workforce in our current capitalist system. The prospect of replacing, say, 80% of the workforce with AI and robots, I think most people would think that's bad, but it does raise the question, why do we need to work? Why do we need to exchange our labour for money? Why should the profit from AI and robots be focused on a few companies that invented them? Why couldn't we as a society own it all? In the novel, May buys a scent to remind her of her time in the botanical gardens. It's an extravagance and completely overpriced. You could compare it to a brand name fashion label, a luxury car, or a massive home extension with, say, spa and sauna. Essentially, everybody in May's world could own this scent if they all profited from AIs and robots. But then again, what if we made it so that clothing from fashion labels or luxury cars, and again, extravagant home extensions, was actually available to everybody? We really only value these things because of how exclusive they are. We make them exclusive artificially by pricing them out of the reach of most people. In a world where we make stuff available for nothing, we wouldn't value it the same, and hence a lot of these things, would we still want them? What does that say about consumerism? And even though in this system most of us are losing, we're already invested in the system that we are losing in, so we want people to be held back further than we are held back, so that we can get ahead. This book makes some great observations about human nature, and let's not spoil it by mentioning the C word. The exploration of the themes were quite mixed, but the plot was nice, the character construction was passable, and the setting works. The prose succeeded in communicating its ideas. Okay, it was clearly not a prose book, but they were fine. They certainly weren't bad. I just think recently we've had The Dream Hotel, Annie Bot, Chain Gang All-Stars. These were all significantly better speculative fiction novels, and they're better because they empathize with the other side of the situation while still being incredibly critical of the status quo and making their point of view crystal clear. And that is what this book lacks. Still, it had some very strong passages in it. Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. This is not my usual style of book. It's not too far from it, and I have just finished reviewing a speculative fiction novel. I do like speculative novels, but only certain styles, and Nnedi Okorafor is writing in a style adjacent to those styles. So I think it is a testament to her abilities and skills as an author that I rated this as highly as I did. Zalu is disabled, angry at the world, and suddenly unemployed after calling out her creative writing student for pretentious and derivative Kerouacian bullshit in front of her entire class. I'm not sure I needed to say derivative in that sentence. I did say Kerouacian, so it was implied. Side note, you know those lists that go around red flag books? On the Road has like a double red flag. Firstly, for the content of the book, and secondly, for the ability of the author. Liking Kerouac is kind of like somebody saying, I really like Hemingway, but he'd be better if you removed all the profundity and made him completely talentless. My dog whines less frequently when it's dinner time and I haven't fed him than old JK. Nonetheless, he's just as articulate. Cathartic as that side note was, I have fallen a little off topic. Zalu is angry for a lot of reasons. Among them is that this boy, who she just got fired for giving a piece of her own mind, is more likely to be published than her, an already published author, and she knows it. She knows it because her latest book has been rejected by yet another publisher, and she decides to write and completely change the direction of her work, writing Rusted Robots, a young adult science fiction about mechs, androids, AI, and the extinction of humanity. And it just flows, and soon she doesn't just have her biggest hit ever, she has the biggest hit of the year, and a multi-book deal with movie in the works. And between Zalu's story, we get passages from her book, giving us a good idea of the plot of the novel that she wrote. The major themes of this book are in the title, Death of the Author. It is something explored from multiple angles. When the movie comes out, it changes the character's name, moves it from Nigeria, and makes several other changes. Fan fiction novels begin to appear with the character names from the movie, and Zalu feels very detached from her work. By the way, that is the most unrealistic part of this book. Anybody writing fan fiction is using the character title from the book and not from the movie. Just saying. As this is happening in the foreground, in the background, Okorafor has been building her next element. Zalu's fame has attracted the attention of a wealthy gentleman. What feels like it could have been a bit of a creepy romance takes a very different turn when it is revealed that technology has advanced in a way quite similar to what is described in Rusted Robots. Zalu is given mechanical legs to test out. Wheelchair-bound, Zalu has a chance to walk again, and causing her fans to ask her if she was turning herself into one of the characters from her novel. There is also an uneasiness around representation of disabled people and choosing to use mechanized legs to walk again. Zalu's celebrity status begins to overtake her identity as an author, and a second book of the series is taking much longer to write than anticipated. And this is one of the other ways Death of the Author is explored, literal death of that part of Zalu's identity. And I'm kind of fortunate enough to really love my job, but in terms of identity, being a librarian doesn't make it into the 10 most important things I think of about myself. And as a rule, I hate it when people are identified by their means of subsistence. It's a horrible capitalist standard to reduce somebody to their job title. You are much more than how you pay the rent. I love this death of an author aspect, as Zalu, who is now wealthy enough to never work again, does whatever she wants to, and that changes and evolves as her character changes. Her goals move as she achieves them. And for a plot-based book, this has a really good, strong character arc. You can see how the events in the plot impact upon Zalu, updating her personality, changing her. I also quite liked Okorafor's prose, and the setting she creates is very strong. She's done very well in the big four elements of writing. But I've spent most of my time reviewing this book discussing its themes. That is, when I wasn't being overly honest about the Beat Generation. And it's probably not the fairest way to review this. It is a plot-based novel. That is definitely the aspect of the book done the best, closely followed by the characters. But themes are how I review a book, and while I like the themes, the value I got from the themes will be similar to all the comments I get agreeing with my derogatory comments about Jack Kerouac. Cathartic, but I'm not expecting them to be particularly deep. But then again, this book wasn't meant to be deep. It's not a literary novel, and it's not trying to be a literary novel. It happens to have some very interesting discussions around the themes, but really it's amazingly executed commercial fiction, and it is a great example of one of the ways Afrofuturism can be awesome. This novel is a little bit too simple for me to rate it higher or to review it later in this video, but if I were rating it on craft alone, it would be in the top 3. Pictures of You by Emma Gray. 15-year-old Evie wakes up in the body of a 30-year-old woman. Where is her best friend Bree? And why is mum on her phone a woman she doesn't know? Where is her real mum? Evie has been in a car accident and her husband is dead. Her support network has changed over the last 15 years, and it turns out she may have burnt some bridges. For reasons she can't explain, Evie runs out of her husband's funeral and jumps into an Uber. The only issue is, it's not an Uber, it's Drew, a boy she knew in the pieces of her memory that are now missing. But Drew's connection to her and her dead husband is really vague. Evie and Drew provide the 2 points of view of the narrative, and as Evie investigates her past, it becomes clear that Drew is hiding things from her. Look, this kind of sounds like a really tacky amnesia plot, and you're just gonna have to take my word on it. It's not. We're tackling some pretty horrible themes, and I just can't tell you what they are because spoilers. I'll vaguely say that this book is feminist and that the themes are dark. I enjoyed the character study in this, as Evie slowly figures out what has happened to her life. She migrates from bratty teenager into young woman. There is a romantic subplot which doesn't feel right, as Evie is mentally a teenager, even if she has the body of a 30-year-old. It's actually quite confusing as she matures, though. While I think the characters are well done in this book, it is a plot-based novel, and appropriately, that is the strongest aspect of this book. The themes have emotional impact, although because they're so linked in with the plot, they lack contrast, depth, and variety. I'm not sure the themes discussed really need those things. These are themes that are really encouraging the reader to empathize with the characters. They're intended as an emotional gut punch, not a scintillating conversation starter. And what we're left with is a blend of literary fiction, romance, thriller, and mystery, which is very readable. Is it brilliant? Not in your life, but it is a very good read. I had my emotions going and I really wanted to see how it ended. Good book. Only Big Bumbum Matters Tomorrow by Damilare Kuku. I don't know if I was delighted or disappointed when this turned out to be a serious novel about a young woman who desires a Brazilian butt lift, BBL. Except it's not that serious a novel. It's an honest work of literature, but it's also aware that it's having fun. I don't know if I'd call it a comedy per se, but it will make you laugh every now and then. It's very successful at inserting humour into situations without distracting from the broader themes and what it is doing. This is a pretty thorough discussion of cosmetic surgery. Okay, in this case it's about butts, but butts are probably the funniest part of the human body. You could insert tummy tuck, boob job, or Botox here, but none of them are quite as funny. It starts out discussing things like cost, accessibility, and then it moves into the stigma around plastic surgery, the risk involved. And none of this is particularly deep, but it continues to peel the layers back. Moving on to self-esteem and sexism, and then my favourite, the privilege of being attractive and how much easier it is to get work, and then the expectation of pretty. And all of this isn't particularly intellectual. Still, it's doing something I love. It is allowing me to empathize with people, not just Nigerian women who are low on confidence because they have a flat bum, but women everywhere, because this is a very broad theme. Also, I just want to acknowledge that men have a pretty tax too. Yeah, it's about 2% of what women go through. It's possible to be successful as an ugly man. I mean, when I Google ugly actors, the list that I found has Steve Buscemi one spot below Maggie Gyllenhaal, and I don't think you need me to analyse just how stupid that is. There's no getting away from just how simple these themes are, but when you watch a reality TV cooking program and one contestant says something like, "I'm making a dish that harnesses the flavour of ginger, pickled salsify, 12 hours sous vide tiger prostate and the smell of dirty socks after a hard day's work, and I'm expressing that in a variety of textures. The protein is a foam and I've made a past-dip lollipop." The judges will always say something like, "It's a risk. I just hope it pays off." And then the other contestant walks in and says something like, "It's a sandwich." And the judges ask, "What's special about it?" And the contestant says, "It's a really good sandwich." And the judges are like, "Soft bread, great filling," and then something about acidity, which I assume means it's so much better than a parsnip lollipop. The thing is, simplicity done well is often what we want. And this novel is that awesome sandwich. Simple, playful, not blinded by ambition, but really successful in its aim. The prose is done in that Nigerian style, which I really enjoy. I love the prose, but other people maybe will let that style get in the way of their rating. I enjoyed the plot. It was appropriate to the story. Characters, yeah, I think they let them down just a little bit, probably the weakest aspect of the book, but overall this is a good one. Wild Ground by Emily Usher. This has been sold as a romance, which I think is completely unfair to readers who A, pick this up expecting a romance, and B, maybe put off picking this up because it's classified as a romance. This is a dark exploration of identity, family, love, mental illness, abandonment, and drugs, with a bit of romance running through it. Chrissy moves in with her latest boyfriend Barry, taking her teenage daughter Neef, short for Jennifer, I don't get it, with her. Chrissy is beautiful, perpetually poor, and falls in love very easily, even when she's in a relationship with somebody else. Neef develops a friendship with Danny, and this is the romance that this book is being marketed as. A friendship to lovers kind of romance. But this is not a book that will have the usual miscommunication resulting in a third act breakup and a final act get back together storyline. Barry starts to do quite well in the pub he owns, and Chrissy convinces him to send Neef to an exclusive private school for girls, spending her evenings in a pub with all sorts and her days at a school with very rich girl. Neef, somewhat predictably, falls into the drug trade, falls out of love with school, and something happens with her mother. Something that I won't reveal because spoilers, but yeah, it's dark. While that storyline is being developed, there is a second storyline working in between the gaps of it. A woman working in a cafe in London, a long way from Yorkshire, where the rest of this book is based, encounters a man she knows and wants nothing to do with, but agrees to see him, answering his questions. This is Neef at 30 and Danny's father, who is looking for Danny. Something has gone wrong, but why doesn't Neef want to see Danny's dad? The answer is hidden in the earlier timeline, and I enjoyed the way Emily Usher has the two lines communicate with each other, having information from one build tension in the other and vice versa. This is well done. This is how you do two timelines. There are some very dark themes in this. Both Neef and Danny are missing parents for various different reasons. I enjoyed the character building of Neef. For the majority of this book, she was a teenage girl who had to be more mature than she actually was, but because she was a teenager and because of her situation, she was super mature in some areas and super juvenile in others. Her character was really well considered and communicated by Emily Usher. The plot was perfect for me. Two timelines, tensioned in both, and I just wanted to keep reading. I don't need anything more in a plot. I like a simple plot done really well. I like a sandwich plot. The setting is great. You feel the difference between poor Yorkshire, poor London, and the scenes in wealthy Yorkshire. You can quickly intuit where you are in the novel without having to reread a paragraph or two if you take a break from reading. Everything about this book is amazing, and I just really wanted to love this book to pieces, but I didn't. It's unfortunately forgettable, and I don't really know why. Intellectually, this is the perfect book. Emotionally, it didn't scar my soul in the way other novels like this do. I would love to know if you've read this book. Did you have the same issue as me? I can only recommend this book based on the incredible craft of the author and assume that I was having some sort of bad patch when I read this book, and that it's not the book, it's the reader. But I'd be curious to know if other readers agree with me. The Burrow by Melanie Chen. A family of four, parents Jin and Amy, daughter Lucy and Amy's mother Pauline, are grieving the loss of Ruby, a baby girl who just prior to the beginning of this book dies in a shock accident. The family decides to adopt a pet bunny in order to distract them from their issues and bring some much needed cheer to the household. I love the logic process here. Shall I deal with my emotions or take in a cute animal? It's the sort of thing that seems really stupid, but deep down I think there's quite a few of us on team cute animal. Initially the lagomorph has the desired impact, but after a violent break-in, the family's collective masks begin to crumble. They start to fight and details of Ruby's death are slowly revealed. What I really like about this slow reveal is that it changes your judgment of how different people are acting. As humans, we tend to judge people as terrible humans very easily, but the vast majority of cases, there is an underlying reason for people behaving badly. Not saying that that excuses the behaviour, but what this book does by showing us the reasoning behind the behaviour is challenge our initial perspective of the characters in the book. This is a simple, dark-focused novel about grief. It is getting a lot of praise here in Australia. It has been longlisted for the Miles Franklin Award, and in a fair and just world, which we don't live in, this would definitely make the shortlist. Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. I was a big fan of Wilkerson's first novel, Black Cake. If you watched my best books of the decade so far video, Black Cake was one of the last novels I cut from that list. Good Dirt for me confirms Wilkerson as an author of immense talent and great storytelling. But nonetheless, this novel is maybe half a step behind her exceptional first novel. And this is maybe unfair. If this was my first Wilkerson novel, I would be saying, read this book, it's amazing. But I had very high expectations of this book, and it was so close to achieving them. Airey's brother Baz is murdered in an armed robbery gone wrong in their home. At the same time, the Freedman's prized possession, a century-old earthen jar, has been smashed on the floor. The crime was never sold, and due to the Freedmans being the only black family in a very well-to-do, predominantly white area, the case has gained some fame and notoriety, and Airey has become some sort of minor celebrity because of it. Not something she was seeking, but most people look at her and say, "You look familiar, where do I know you?" When Airey's high-profile romance becomes a high-profile breakup, Airey flees to France to escape things and clear her head. The privilege of the rich right there. When something crap happens in my life, all I can afford is a large nachos with extra guac. I know I'm flexing a bit there with the guacamole, but you can afford guac too if you sacrifice luxuries like stable housing. Look, making the Freedmans wealthy actually allows Wilkerson to explore racism away from financial discrimination. It can be very complex talking about racism in poorer communities. Is X or Y related to skin colour or to poverty? And if it is related to poverty, are they just poor because they're black? So the Freeman's affluence gives us a clarity to what is usually a very messy situation. Wilkerson's best talent is her storytelling. She is an author who instantly projects a security upon her readers, letting us know that we're in for a book of good quality. She is always going to produce something good, whatever she decides to write. She could decide to write Mills and Boon. She can also create characters, discuss themes, build a setting, write nice prose. She can do all those things, but at the heart of it, she is a fantastic storyteller. To demonstrate that, the history of the jar becomes an important part of the narrative as we're transported back to Africa when Airey's ancestors were first kidnapped into slavery, and we learn the story of how they ended up in New England. The jar provides us with a family saga. Airey's romantic life provides us with romance. Baz's murder is a mystery, and the whole time we're examining racism, giving us a literary fiction hit. If Airey could now just somehow figure out how to slay a dragon in space, we'd have all the major genres represented. And Airey's romantic situation, her brother's murder, her parents, who I haven't discussed in this review, and the history of the earthen jar are all linked. Some of the links are plot-based, some are thematic, but most of them are both, meaning that the romance is a little bit literary, the literary is a little bit mysterious, the mystery is a bit of a family saga, and the family saga is a bit of a romance. They all add upon each other. It's such an intelligent way of writing, giving this novel a broad audience, and for me personally, as a reader, literary fiction is always going to be my favourite genre, but I like mystery, romance and family saga too. I like all the genres, I just have a clear preference, so I can get the joy of the genres I don't read very much of at all, while still getting the satisfaction of my favourite genre. It's delicious. This is a great book. I'm sorry I read Black Cake first and I liked it more, but this is the curse of a very talented author. Sometimes it's not possible to best your last book. Still, great reading. The last, and I will say comfortably the best book or books I'm going to review in this video are written by Eimear McBride. I'm going to review her two novels, The City Changes Its Face and its prequel, The Lesser Bohemians, together. Let me start by saying this. Don't read the new novel, The City Changes Its Face, without first reading The Lesser Bohemians. Both books follow Ellie and Stephen and their love affair, and you could read The City Changes Its Face on its own. It does stand alone, it could work, but the characters are introduced in The Lesser Bohemians. You will get far better understanding, especially as the focus of the novel moves slightly from Ellie and towards Stephen. The second thing I need to say about this is if you've not read Eimear McBride before, she has a unique style to her, and it takes some getting used to. For me, these books represent my second and my third McBride novel after her Woman's Prize winning book, A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. And I feel like it has taken me about 1.5 books to be able to read her and enjoy what she's saying and the weird chopped up way she says things. Although it's fair to say that McBride is not the kind of author one should use the word enjoy to describe their writing. She definitely breaks all of the rules, producing something that simply shouldn't work but somehow does, and I'm not even sure if McBride understands why her strange style produces such good books, but she's leaning into it hard. So I'm going to give you some contradictory advice here. You should give Eimear McBride the time to understand her, to get used to her style and figure out what she's doing. But you should also accept that she's either going to be an author for you or she's simply not. In The Lesser Bohemians, we see Ellie, 18, an Irish acting student in the mid-90s, meet Stephen, 38, an actor of some fame who is teaching and acting. This starts off as a typical problematic romance, and I'm sure some of you will be thinking, yeah, I've read that before, but this is not McBride's endgame. Instead, she's using this romance to build these characters, to show us their flaws and weaknesses. Once the initial "she's young, he's famous, let's introduce our ugly parts to each other" has worn off, there's a relationship there between Ellie and Stephen, and it's completely dysfunctional, and yet it also kind of works, and you're left asking, why? What are these two characters getting out of each other? Why do they stay with somebody who is so horrible? And to be fair, they're both horrible. It doesn't matter which character you're empathizing with. And then once you get over this weird relationship, the weird story begins. And it's dark. And I say that a lot. Darkness often drives a book, but this is exploring something really horrible in an intimate and raw way. And that is why McBride's writing style is so good. It's also raw, it captures snippets and it jumps, but it also cuts out every unnecessary word. Actually, it possibly cuts out quite a few of the necessary ones too. If it's debatable, it's just simply gone. But she jumps from emotional hit to emotional hit. It is overwhelming in just the way the characters must feel. It is connective and it's brilliant. Both Stephen and Ellie have a history of abuse when they were young, and the age gap thing, well, it's meaningless next to somebody who understands what you have been through. But that doesn't mean it doesn't complicate things. That is more or less the subject of The City Changes Its Face. We learn that Stephen has a daughter, Grace, in the Lesser Bohemians, and the book ends with them making contact. And in The City Changes Its Face, she is visiting 17-year-old Grace to Ali's 20. The girls have more in common than they do with the 40-year-old father/boyfriend, something of which he is not blind to. Having started the process of dealing with his trauma in the first novel, Stephen is haunted by something his abuser says to him. "You're the same as me. You'll see one day. You'll do it too." Stephen has lived his entire life scared he is going to hurt Grace, and now she is visiting. But Stephen can't stop seeing Ali and Grace as similar. Instantly, sex between Stephen and Ali stops. This is something that is very unusual, as they're basically constant fuckhounds, and this distresses Ali quite a bit, who becomes rather concerned about their relationship. The difference between an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old is quite a lot, and that is why I recommend reading these two books together. Ali is insecure in the first novel and she acts out. She is insecure in the second novel too, and she also acts out. But she acts out in a very different way. It is a much more mature way, and it is a great way to show character growth and character consistency at the same time. Really superb writing there. I love this relationship between our two central characters. McBride is trusting you to empathise with both of them at the same time, even while they're both behaving really badly. You have to embrace the greyness of the situation. Ali is hurt by Stephen's actions. Stephen is traumatized by his past. They're both acting in ways that are very understandable, but they're hurting each other quite a lot. And then they're healing each other too. You just simply cannot go into either of these two books and read them with any judgment at all. And if you do that, you'll be rewarded with a disgustingly complex minefield that is such a rich reading experience. The last thing I'll tell you I loved about these books before I summarize things is that Ali is our narrator for most of the novel, yet Stephen's experiences loom the largest. They would have completely dominated the narrative if he were the narrator, but the choice of narrator balanced things, and it allows us to have a completely different story, focusing much more on this relationship. And it also allows us to consider the impact of trauma, not just on the person who is traumatized, but on the people in his life. It's not like Ali has a sunshine and roses past either. There is the sad fact that people with trauma are more likely to end up in a close relationship with somebody else with trauma. And this is the truth here. Ali is actually a lot closer to her trauma in terms of time, and they impact her too. And I think the most important thing to remember about trauma is it's not what you went through. It's that trauma impacts different people differently, and that one person can go through like some really horrific of events and be traumatized by something that seems really minor to somebody else. But ultimately, it must have been so hard to keep things in check, and McBride has done that with absolute expertise. An emotional roller coaster that will leave your insides feeling like Evander Holyfield's ear. Themes of the most appalling abuse and the impact of that abuse, which doesn't just fall into this incredibly broken yet loving relationship, but includes things like prostitution, homelessness, and drug addiction. And all of the themes are depressingly harrowing. These novels have more than great character work, prose that will divide readers, a plot that is very simple and hardly the point of the book, but I really enjoyed it. I will always love a simple plot done very well. The setting is quality too. I have never been to London in the 1990s, although I have seen a lot of TV and read a lot of books based there, and this was very consistent. If I didn't know where they were, I'm relatively sure I would have guessed. The City Changes Its Face is almost certainly going to make the Booker Prize longlist later this year. It is probably the stronger of these two novels, but maybe that is because of the excellent work the Lesser Bohemians did in building these characters and this fraught relationship. I have completely changed my mind on McBride. She is amazing. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye.